The moment this video found you, something unusual had already happened. Not 5 minutes ago. Not this morning. Long before you pressed play. Somewhere between your last disappointment, your last unanswered question, and the quiet moment when you almost gave up believing that someone out there truly understands you, a message was left behind. Not on your phone. Not in your inbox. Not in a letter. But in the strange places people almost never notice. And if you're still watching, then don't rush away, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why so many people say they discovered the message only after everything in their life suddenly started making sense. Close your eyes for just 1 second. Think about the last person you couldn't stop thinking about. Don't say their name. Just picture their face. Now ask yourself one question. Why did they appear in your mind so quickly? Coincidence? Or because this story has already begun long before today? Tonight, I'm going to tell you the story of a hidden message, one that seems impossible, one that changes depending on who hears it, one that many people claim they only understood after meeting the person who transformed their lives forever. Whether you believe in destiny or not doesn't matter. Because sometimes the greatest mysteries aren't about proving they're real. They're about what they awaken inside us. Imagine walking through an old town just before sunset. The streets are quiet. The wind carries the sound of distant church bells. You notice a weathered wooden bench beneath an ancient tree. Nothing special. Until you see 3 words carved into the wood. Wait for me. Simple. Ordinary. Yet somehow, impossible to ignore. Who wrote them? Who were they waiting for? And why does it suddenly feel as though those words weren't meant for everyone? Only for one person. That's how hidden messages begin. Not with thunder. Not with dramatic signs. But with ordinary moments that refuse to leave your thoughts. The story you're about to hear isn't about predicting your future. It's about recognizing the moments that quietly shape it. Many people spend years searching for grand answers while overlooking the smallest clues. A familiar melody. A repeated dream. A sentence spoken by a stranger. A forgotten photograph. A place that somehow feels familiar even though you've never been there. Imagine someone who has never met you, yet unknowingly leaves behind tiny fragments of themselves. A favorite quote in a second-hand book. A note tucked inside an old journal. A song added to a public playlist years before your paths ever cross. Individually, they mean nothing. Together, they begin telling a story. Not because of magic, but because human lives often intersect in remarkable and unexpected ways. Here's the strange part. People usually recognize these connections only after looking back. Rarely while they're happening. That's what makes hidden messages so fascinating. They're invisible. Until experience reveals them. Think about your own life. Has there ever been a conversation you didn't understand until months later? A coincidence that seemed meaningless until another event suddenly completed the picture? It's almost like reading only half a sentence. And discovering the ending much later. That's the feeling this story explores. Because somewhere tonight, Someone is also wondering whether they're closer to finding the person they've been searching for than they realize. And perhaps they're asking the very same question. What if the message has already been left behind, and I simply haven't recognized it yet? Imagine opening a dusty library book. Inside, between two forgotten pages, rests a folded piece of paper. No name. No date. Only one sentence. If you're reading this, keep believing. You smile. Probably written for someone else. Yet somehow, it arrives exactly when you needed encouragement. Was it meant for you? Probably not. Did it still change your day? Absolutely. Sometimes meaning isn't created by certainty. It's created by timing. The most unforgettable stories aren't remembered because they're impossible. They're remembered because they remind us to pay closer attention to life. Because the greatest discoveries rarely arrive with loud announcements. They whisper. They wait. They invite curiosity instead of demanding belief. And perhaps that's why hidden messages feel so powerful. Not because they guarantee answers, but because they encourage us to notice the extraordinary hidden inside ordinary moments. So stay with me. Because the next chapter begins with a train ticket, a forgotten cafe, and a single sentence written on a napkin that no one expected to survive the passing of time. That sentence would eventually connect two complete strangers, in a way neither of them could have imagined. The cafe had stood on the same corner for nearly 40 years. Nothing about it seemed extraordinary. Its wooden sign had faded under countless summers. The windows carried tiny scratches from decades of rain and dust. The old clock above the entrance had stopped working years ago, yet the owner refused to replace it. He always smiled and said, "Some moments deserve to stay exactly where they are." Most people laughed when they heard that. Then they ordered coffee, checked their phones, and left. But not everyone. One rainy afternoon, a young traveler stepped inside carrying nothing but a backpack and a train ticket folded carefully inside an old notebook. They weren't looking for love. They weren't searching for destiny. They were simply waiting for the next train. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Inside, the cafe grew quieter. Only 4 people remained. An elderly couple speaking softly. A student reading beside the window. The owner polishing cups behind the counter. And the traveler. Minutes passed. The traveler opened the notebook absent-mindedly. As the train ticket slipped onto the table, something else fell with it. A tiny piece of paper. Yellow with age. Its edges curled from time. The traveler frowned. "I've never seen this before." Slowly, they unfolded it. Only 7 words had been written. "You'll understand this when the timing is right." No signature. No explanation. No date. Nothing. The traveler searched every page of the notebook, trying to remember where the note had come from. Impossible. The notebook had belonged to them for years. How could something like this appear unnoticed? The owner glanced over. "You found it." The traveler looked up. You've seen this before? The old man smiled. No. But I've seen that expression. The expression people make when life asks them a question before giving them the answer. The traveler laughed nervously. It's probably nothing. The owner nodded. Most important things begin as probably nothing. Silence settled between them. Outside. The rain continued. Inside. The traveler kept staring at those 7 words. For reasons they couldn't explain. They couldn't put the paper away. Hours later. After the rain finally stopped. The traveler boarded the evening train. Halfway through the journey. They noticed something unusual. Across the aisle sat another passenger reading a worn paperback novel. As the train swayed gently, a bookmark slipped from between the pages. It landed near the traveler's feet. Without thinking, they picked it up. "I'm sorry," the other passenger said. "That's mine." The traveler smiled and handed it back. Then both froze. Because written on the back of the bookmark, in handwriting almost identical to the mysterious note, were the words, "Some meetings begin years before introductions." Neither person spoke for several seconds. Neither understood why the coincidence felt so strangely personal. Finally, the passenger laughed. "Funny sentence, isn't it?" The traveler nodded. "Where did you get that bookmark?" "It came with the book when I bought it second-hand. I've kept it ever since." No idea who wrote it. The conversation ended there. The train reached its destination. Both passengers walked in opposite directions. Never exchanging names. Never asking for contact information. Never expecting to meet again. Years later, that brief encounter would become one of the most important memories either of them possessed. Not because something magical happened that night. Nothing dramatic occurred. No romantic music. No impossible miracle. Only 2 strangers. 2 forgotten handwritten messages. And 1 unanswered question. Sometimes life plants tiny moments that don't bloom until much later. We often imagine meaningful events announcing themselves with certainty. Instead, they usually arrive disguised as ordinary afternoons. Think back to your own memories. Have you ever remembered someone years after meeting them for only a few minutes? Have you ever realized that a seemingly insignificant conversation quietly changed the direction of your life? Those are the moments this story is about. Not predictions. Not guarantees. But the quiet threads connecting experiences we rarely notice while living them. Months passed. The traveler forgot about the train. Forgot about the bookmark. Forgot about the mysterious passenger. Life became busy again. Work. Responsibilities. Unexpected setbacks. Dreams postponed. Hope slowly replaced by routine. The folded paper remained inside the notebook. Untouched. Until one evening, while cleaning an old shelf, the notebook fell open by itself. The note slipped out again. "You'll understand this when the timing is right." This time, the words felt different. Not because they had changed, but because the traveler had. Growth has a strange habit. Sometimes the same sentence reveals an entirely different meaning depending on who reads it. That night, instead of putting the note away, the traveler asked a question. What if hidden messages aren't waiting for the future? What if they're waiting for us to become the person capable of understanding them? That single thought changed everything. Instead of searching desperately for signs, the traveler began noticing people. Listening more carefully. Paying attention. Offering kindness without expecting anything back. Smiling more often. Calling old friends. Forgiving old hurts. Living differently. And something remarkable happened. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But steadily. The world seemed to answer with opportunities that had always existed, yet had gone unnoticed before. A conversation led to another. A recommendation opened an unexpected door. A missed appointment created a chance meeting. An accidental detour introduced a lifelong friendship. None of these events proved destiny. But together, they revealed something far more powerful. Attention changes experience. The things we choose to notice quietly shape the stories we remember. Perhaps hidden messages don't create our future. Perhaps they awaken the awareness needed to recognize it. And somewhere, without either of them realizing it, the stranger from the train was beginning to discover the very same truth. Neither knew their paths would cross again. Neither suspected that another forgotten message, left years earlier inside an old photograph, was already waiting for both of them. The photograph contained only one sentence. But that sentence would connect every mystery that had come before. The photograph was older than anyone could remember. Its edges had faded into soft shades of brown. A tiny crack stretched across one corner. There were no names written on the front. No date. No location. Just the image of an empty bridge disappearing into the morning fog. At first glance, it looked completely ordinary. The kind of picture someone might pass without a second thought. But hidden behind it, written so lightly that the ink had almost disappeared, was a single sentence. Some journeys begin after you think you've reached the end. No signature. No explanation. Just another forgotten message waiting patiently for the right eyes. The photograph belonged to an elderly woman who spent every Saturday morning organizing donations at a small neighborhood charity shop. She never knew who had donated it. She never tried to find out. She simply placed it inside a small wooden box labeled Old Memories. Months later, the traveler walked into that very shop. Not because they needed anything. Not because they had planned to visit. Only because heavy rain had forced them to step inside while waiting for the storm to pass. The tiny bell above the door rang softly. The elderly woman smiled. "Welcome." The traveler nodded politely and wandered between shelves filled with books, clocks, old postcards, forgotten cameras, handwritten recipes, vinyl records, and family albums that no longer belonged to anyone. Every object carried a story. Every shelf felt like a museum of unfinished chapters. Then, almost without thinking, the traveler picked up the wooden box. Inside, beneath several black and white photographs, lay the picture of the bridge. For reasons impossible to explain, they turned it over. Their hearts skipped. There it was. Another sentence. Another message. Another mystery. 3 messages. 3 completely different places. 3 unrelated moments. Yet somehow, they all felt connected. You'll understand this when the timing is right. Some meetings begin years before introductions. Some journeys begin after you think you've reached the end. The traveler whispered the words aloud. The elderly woman looked over. You noticed it. You've read this? She smiled gently. I've read all of them. All of them? There are more. The traveler stared in disbelief. What do you mean, more? The woman walked slowly toward an old cabinet near the back wall. From the bottom drawer, she removed a weathered envelope tied with faded blue string. Inside were dozens of handwritten notes. Different handwriting. Different paper. Different ink. Some written with fountain pens. Some typed on old typewriters. Some scribbled hurriedly on receipts. Some written carefully on elegant stationery. Every note contained only one sentence. Every sentence spoke about hope, patience, courage, unexpected meetings, second chances, or quiet beginnings. The traveler flipped through them carefully. One read, "The person searching for you is also learning how to recognize you." Another, "Not every delay is a denial." Another, "The right conversation often begins with an ordinary hello." None of them mentioned soulmates. None promised miracles. Yet together, they formed something strangely beautiful. It was as though generations of strangers had unknowingly contributed tiny pieces to one enormous story about human connection. The elderly woman sat quietly before speaking. People think hidden messages predict the future. They don't. They prepare the heart. The traveler looked up. What do you mean? She smiled. If someone tells you happiness is coming tomorrow, you wait. But if someone reminds you to become kinder today, you change. And changed people notice opportunities that others overlook. Silence filled the little shop. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight slipped through the dusty windows. Tiny golden particles floated through the air. For a brief moment, time itself seemed slower. The traveler carefully placed every note back inside the envelope. Where did these come from? The elderly woman shrugged. I've been asking that question for 20 years. Every few months, someone donates another. No names. No explanations. Just messages. And every person who finds one believes it was waiting for them. The traveler smiled. Maybe it was. The woman laughed softly. Maybe. But perhaps the real miracle isn't the message. It's the person you become after reading it. Those words stayed with the traveler long after leaving the shop. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Life continued. But something had shifted. Instead of asking, "When will I meet the right person?" the traveler began asking, "Am I becoming the right person?" That single question quietly transformed everything. They listened more. Judged less. Apologized sooner. Held on to anger for shorter periods. Called family more often. Spent less time chasing perfection. Spent more time appreciating ordinary mornings. Unexpectedly, their world became larger. New friendships appeared. Old misunderstandings disappeared. Conversations became deeper. Laughter became easier. It wasn't because hidden notes possessed supernatural power. It was because meaningful words often inspire meaningful actions. One autumn afternoon, nearly 3 years after the train journey, the traveler attended a local community book festival. Hundreds of people wandered between small tents. Authors signed books. Musicians played gentle melodies. Children laughed nearby. Nothing unusual. Until someone accidentally bumped into the traveler near a second-hand bookstall. "I'm so sorry." The voice sounded strangely familiar. The traveler looked up. Recognition arrived instantly. The passenger from the train. Years older. Still carrying books. Still using handmade bookmarks. For a second, neither spoke. Then both laughed. "I know you." The train. The bookmark. They remembered everything. Even after all those years. Conversation came naturally. Hours disappeared. Stories unfolded. Dreams were shared. Neither mentioned destiny. Neither claimed fate had arranged the meeting. They simply appreciated how extraordinary ordinary life could sometimes become. As the afternoon ended, the former stranger reached into a backpack. "I've carried something for years." Out came the old bookmark. Still preserved. Still slightly worn. The traveler smiled. "I still have my note." Both laughed. Neither could explain why they had kept those forgotten pieces of paper for so long. Perhaps because some objects quietly become symbols of hope. Perhaps because every person needs reminders that meaningful connections often begin long before we recognize them. Or perhaps because every great story deserves a tangible memory. As sunset painted the sky with warm shades of gold and crimson, they walked slowly across a bridge overlooking calm water. The traveler suddenly stopped. "This bridge. It looks familiar." The other person nodded. "I was thinking the same thing." They stood silently, looking across the river. Then it happened. The traveler opened the notebook to show the old messages. The photograph slipped out. The bridge in the picture. It was the very same bridge where they were standing. Neither spoke for a long time. Not because they believed something impossible had happened, but because life had woven together years of ordinary moments into one unforgettable memory. Sometimes the greatest surprise isn't discovering that the world is mysterious. It's realizing how meaningful ordinary moments become when viewed together. The hidden message had never been a secret prediction. It had always been an invitation. An invitation to remain hopeful. To stay open. To notice beauty. To become someone capable of recognizing meaningful connections when they finally appeared. And perhaps that has been the message all along. Not hidden in photographs. Not hidden in notebooks. Not hidden on bookmarks. But quietly waiting inside every ordinary day. For someone willing to slow down long enough to notice it.